I still hear your voice at night. Make me feel alright. Jump right back into my life. Cause we could dance the night away. Make me love you through the haze. Ain't no need to be afraid.
Hey, have you heard about Fregoli Delusion? Why does your brain believe everyone is the same person? Imagine walking through a crowded street. Hundreds of people, different faces, different voices, different lives. But suddenly you notice something strange. That man across the street looks familiar. You turn and a woman passing by has the same eyes, the same expression. Another person and another. Slowly, a terrifying thought appears. What if they're not strangers? What if they're all the same person? Changing clothes, changing appearances, following you everywhere.
Yeah, I have. It sounds surreal and terrifying at the same time. The feeling you describe is exactly how Fregoli delusion can present. It's one of the rare delusional misidentification syndromes, situations where the brain misattributes identity. In this case, completely different people are experienced as one single person in disguise.
What makes it even stranger is how vivid the conviction is. The person experiencing it isn't pretending or confused for a moment. They genuinely believe the link is real. So how does the brain arrive at something so confidently false?
A good place to start is how our brains process faces. We rely on two somewhat distinct systems, one that decodes facial features and appearance, and another that attaches emotional meaning, that gut sense of familiarity. Imagine these as a face recognition scanner and an emotional tagger. Normally, they work together. You see a face, the scanner recognizes a pattern, and the tagger says, "Oh, that's someone I know," or "No, stranger."
So in Fregoli delusion, those systems go out of sync?
Exactly. Scientists think there's a kind of disconnection or miswiring between regions like the fusiform face area, which helps with visual facial recognition, and limbic structures like the amygdala that contribute emotional salience and familiarity. The result can be hyperfamiliarity. A stranger triggers an inappropriate feeling of knowing. The brain, faced with this mismatch, invents an explanation, often a story of disguise or persecution, to make sense of the odd feeling.
That explains the why in a mechanical way. But are there known triggers? Who gets Fregoli delusion?
Fregoli is rare, but it appears in a handful of contexts. It's been described in people with traumatic brain injury, right hemisphere stroke, dementia, especially in some neurodegenerative conditions, epilepsy, and it can also be seen with psychiatric illnesses such as schizophrenia. Sometimes medication changes or lesions that affect temporal and frontal lobes are involved. The underlying theme is disruption to circuits that link perception, emotion, and identity.
I remember hearing about Capgras syndrome too. How is Fregoli different?
Great comparison. Capgras is almost the mirror image. Someone, often a close relative, is believed to be an imposter, emotionally replaced despite looking the same. Fregoli, on the other hand, involves strangers being seen as the same familiar person in disguise. Both reveal the delicate balance between seeing and knowing, and how our brain stitches together visual input and emotional memory to create identity.
Does Fregoli ever lead to dangerous behavior? If someone thinks one person is following them in different costumes, that could escalate.
Unfortunately, yes. The delusion can be associated with intense paranoia or fear. In some reported cases, it has led to aggressive actions toward the perceived persecutor. That's why medical evaluation, empathy, and safety planning are important. Treating the underlying neurological or psychiatric cause with antipsychotic medication when appropriate, neurological care or therapy can reduce symptoms.
I feel for anyone living with that. It must be disorienting to not be able to trust your own perception.
Absolutely. One of the most striking things about syndromes like this is how they remind us that perception is an active construction. Our brains constantly interpret incomplete information and fill gaps with stories that make sense to us. Most of the time, those stories are useful. They let us recognize friends, predict danger, navigate social life. But when the system misfires, the story can pull us away from shared reality.
So what should people know if they suspect someone they love is experiencing misidentification?
First, approach with compassion. The belief is real to them. Try to avoid blunt confrontation that dismisses their experience. Seek medical help. A neurologist and psychiatrist can work together to assess for brain injury, dementia, seizure activity, or psychiatric disorders. Treatment targets the cause and the symptoms. And keep safety in mind if the person expresses fear or shows potential for aggression.
I feel for anyone living with that. It must be disorienting to not be able to trust your own perception.
Absolutely. One of the most striking things about syndromes like this is how they remind us that perception is an active construction. Our brains constantly interpret incomplete information and fill gaps with stories that make sense to us. Most of the time, those stories are useful. They let us recognize friends, predict danger, navigate social life. But when the system misfires, the story can pull us away from shared reality.
So what should people know if they suspect someone they love is experiencing misidentification?
First, approach with compassion. The belief is real to them. Try to avoid blunt confrontation that dismisses their experience. Seek medical help. A neurologist and psychiatrist can work together to assess for brain injury, dementia, seizure activity, or psychiatric disorders. Treatment targets the cause and the symptoms. And keep safety in mind if the person expresses fear or shows potential for aggression.
I feel for anyone living with that. It must be disorienting to not be able to trust your own perception.
Absolutely. One of the most striking things about syndromes like this is how they remind us that perception is an active construction. Our brains constantly interpret incomplete information and fill gaps with stories that make sense to us. Most of the time, those stories are useful. They let us recognize friends, predict danger, navigate social life. But when the system misfires, the story can pull us away from shared reality.
Thanks for exploring this with me. If you enjoyed our conversation about Fregoli Delusion and how the brain builds, and sometimes misbuilds, identity, we'll be back with more mind-bending stories on brain glitch. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. We'll be back soon with more engaging content. If this topic resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who loves neuroscience, psychology, or weird brain stories.
So, why would the brain insist that strangers are the same person? The answer may lie in one powerful feeling: familiarity.
Familiarity. It sounds simple, but it's huge. Every day your brain makes thousands of recognition decisions, mostly instantly, without any effort. You see a friend's face and you just know who they are. But what if that feeling shows up at the wrong time?
That's where Fregoli delusion comes in. People with it believe different strangers are actually the same person in disguise. To everyone else, it looks impossible. To the person experiencing it, it feels perfectly logical.
Why does that happen? Well, recognition isn't just about vision. Your eyes take in the features, but your brain also asks, how do I feel about this face? Normally those answers line up, but sometimes they get disconnected.
Exactly. The face processing parts of the brain, think of regions like the fusiform gyrus, may still register the visual details correctly, but the emotional signal that says this is familiar can become overactive or misrouted. A stranger triggers that warm, known feeling, and the brain needs an explanation.
So when the brain can't explain the mismatch, it invents a story. It must be the same person. They're wearing a disguise. It's not just random fantasy. It's the brain preferring a wrong answer to no answer at all.
That impulse to fill gaps with a coherent narrative is something our minds do all the time. We make sense of noisy information by weaving it into a story. Usually that story matches reality, but occasionally one tiny error changes the whole plot.
Take a simple everyday example. You pass someone on the street and your gut says, I know them. You stop, search your memory, maybe call out a name. Most times you're right. But imagine that gut feeling belongs to a different person entirely. Now you've assigned an identity that doesn't exist.
In Fregoli delusion, that assigning becomes fixed and elaborate. The person believes the same hidden identity is following or persecuting them. Sometimes it's linked with paranoia or other brain injuries. Lesions in the right hemisphere or frontal lobe can disrupt the networks that check and correct those stories.
Researchers talk about disconnection between face recognition and the emotional memory system. The emotional signal, often involving the amygdala and medial temporal structures, is out of sync with visual recognition. The mind notices the mismatch and confabulates an explanation that restores coherence.
Confabulation, making up memories or explanations without meaning to deceive, is a key piece here. It's not lying. It's the brain's best attempt to keep the narrative intact when some pieces are missing or scrambled.
And what's striking is how persuasive those internal stories can be. For the person experiencing them, the world reshapes itself to fit the narrative. A stranger becomes someone familiar. Different faces collapse into one identity, and reality warps around the brain's interpretation.
That leads to a bigger question. If our brains are constantly creating meaning, how many other small fabrications do they make that we never notice? How many times do we accept our brain's quick explanations as truth without checking them?
Probably a lot more than we think. Our perception is an active process.
We don't just passively record the world, we predict it and fill in gaps. Prediction is efficient, but it can also be fallible.
So is Fregoli delusion simply mistaken recognition? No, it's far more complex. The eyes see the correct face, but the brain assigns the wrong identity. The failure is in how the brain ties faces to feelings and stories.
Maybe the most remarkable lesson here is this. Your brain doesn't just recognize people, it creates meaning. It connects faces, memories, and emotions into a single, complete story. Most of the time that story is accurate, but sometimes one tiny error changes the entire plot.
Next time you instantly recognize someone, take a moment to appreciate the miracle happening in your head. Your brain solved an incredibly complex puzzle in a fraction of a second, and almost always it gets it right.
But when the system fails, reality itself can begin to unravel. And perhaps that's the biggest brain glitch of all. The people you think you know are not only recognized by your eyes, they're recognized by the stories your brain chooses to believe.
Thanks for listening to Brain Glitch, where every mystery begins with a story and ends inside your mind.
See you in the next glitch. After credits teaser. Next time, imagine standing in a crowded place when someone nearby suddenly collapses. Dozens of people see it, yet no one moves. Everyone waits for someone else to help. Why does responsibility disappear when more people are watching? The bystander effect.
I still hear your voice at night, make me feel alright. Jump right back into my heart. 'Cause we could dance the night away, make me love you through the haze. Ain't no need to be afraid,